Thank you for inviting me to your important conference. So, yeah, how's your workability this morning? Fine? Looks fine, yes, of course. So I will talk about workability according to longitudinal studies, and also most about longitudinal study I have been done since a junior also at the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health since the beginning of 80s, so quite a long time ago. And we have followed people then from their working life, midlife, until retirement and old age. So why then this topic? You all know that it's, you could say historically, changed to low birth rates and death rates that produce aging population, and where there are fewer younger workers to replace retiring older workers. That's I think you are all familiar with that already now. So, for example, in EU, in about 10 years, there's should be around a third of the total workforce is between 55 to 64 years of age, or should I say 55 plus years. And we also know that economic prosperity, as for example pensions, health care systems, and also productivity depends much on the labor force, how many people are working. So that's why many governments has planned to renew their for example, their pension system, retirement systems, and so on. And in most countries, we already have increased the pension, the retirement age, but it's going on. The process is going on, and it's not also that many countries want to have young people, to start their working life earlier. Also, so in all, the length of the career is in the future much longer than before. Then, of course, most of the workers have to work longer and have longer exposure than for the work, also for the risks at the work then. And also more changes are occurring during their working life. So for preventing higher incidence of ill health, efforts have to be made to ensure safe and healthy working conditions throughout the whole working life course. So, but I will today, this morning, speak more about then the, should I say, as Pauline said, not so young, or whatever we call it. Yeah, that's a difficult way how to use it. Mostly we then use 50 plus or 55 plus or something like that. That's yeah. So a little bit about the background also for this kind of, can call it discipline, aging and work, researching how we age, what work-related aging. It has been called industrial gerontology, but nowadays more occupational gerontology. And this is because of, let's say, 4 to 3 decades ago, people who studied aging at work, it was a very small group, and the gerontologist, that was 65 plus. So the people studying aging at work and gerontologists didn't speak as very much together. And but nowadays more and more, as you know, it's not a real border, 65, less than 65 or 65 plus. It's just some kind of limit, but for some decades, so it was calling like 65 plus, then you are old. Nowadays, if you ask this from a gerontologist, 75, 80, 85 maybe, then you start to be old. So it's also time increasing the age limit. And that's, yeah. And that's also, of course, another thing is how we pursue ourselves, young or old, and that kind of things. But I don't go more into that, but the important here is that it's not a strict border between researchers or research in working life and gerontologists nowadays. So occupational gerontology then aims for better planning for aging workforce, labor market, and work and retirement policies. So it's all about also balancing work demands with individual capacities and abilities throughout working life and also beyond. And here just to mention some practical action models. You can call it, of course, something else also than occupational gerontology, but in my point of view now, when I will speak about aging in work, but also how it affects functional abilities and capacities in the old age. So then what about, what is then an aging worker? So we of course, the aging starts from the beginning. You can't say now exactly, of course, what age. But you can say that several large changes in the individual resources and capacities changes during the working life. And often there are changes in health and functional capacities as well as also learning and skills. But important is that not all capacities decline. Very many capacities or abilities increases very long, at least for the whole working life. You can have increased your abilities, and that's very important to remember. And also that the changes are very individual, and the variation between individuals increases with age then. And so you can take as an example whatever, and you see a more individual variation. And that means also that it's a very big individual variation how people cope with the working life also. But then also important is to notice that experience, work experience, job experience may compensate for the declined capacity. And what is often done, what people don't know, but don't want to recognize, is that productivity is often not linked with age. So mostly you can say that according to many studies, a 50, 55 years of age worker is even as productive as a 35, 40 years of age worker, depending a little bit on work, but not that much. So this is very important to remember. And then just maybe some more hypothetical figure then about the work demands and human resources. So I said that already that the abilities, capacities go down with age. But mostly in this, for example, in this figure, you see the functional capacity goes down, but more the physical capacities, physical abilities than the psychosocial, mental capacities. But the main aim with this slide is to show that the work demands don't go down with age, with the people ages. So if you don't do something to work, and we know that the work is changing, that's not the problem, but if it goes directly straight forward, if you don't do anything, then it can be difficulties. The reserve capacity is decreasing with age, and then sometimes it crosses the capacity line then, and then you have difficulties with your workability then. But this is just a theoretical and hypothetical model, so this depends very much on what kind of abilities you mention. So the study, longitudinal study, I will take as an example now this morning about workability and functional abilities, how it goes with age, then is called flame study. It started in 1980 at the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health, and this was also personally my first project I went into as a junior researcher, and that's why now we have since that 5 surveys and then registers until 2016. So it's more than 3 decades of follow-up with the municipal employees in Finland. And we had in the beginning people in their midlife or in average 50 years of age, and followed them up to, with surveys up till more than 80 years of age. And in the beginning, we also had quite a lot of workplace analysis and workplace measurements and so on, but it was just a little number of people then, so I don't take this into account now. But we then looked very carefully about work-related factors, and then, of course, health and functioning and so on. And we followed this for 3 decades. A little bit more than also when we had registered data. And it's still, we follow these people, but as you know, most of the people here has already, of course, all had retired, and many have died, and we don't have any new cohort for this. So this is what we now have. All right, and then when we studied these people, it's more than 6,000 people in the beginning, after 3 decades, we have half of them left who answered the questionnaire. So it was a rather good amount of people. And during the study, from the beginning also, we had models, of course, but then during the study and after the first, second and third follow-up, we started to build up models. And this is one model which is very much used, called a Workability House. And it was built then at the Institute of Occupational Health in Finland. And I don't go into detail with this, but the main thing here to see that the workability, it's built up of many things. And this is the model then, which is with respect to health, then a functional capacity in the bottom. Then you have competence, skills in the second floor, and then values, attitudes, motivation in the third, and 4 then the work environment, both physical and psychosocial work environment. So when you talk about workability, you should take into account all these floors, of course. And of course then it's depending on the outside world also, but if you talk more about the work, then at least the house should be taken into account then. And this model has been used quite much all over the world now. For some years I saw a review that this is one of the most used models now for workability studies. Then also, some of you at least may know that workability measurements could be, for example, measured by a Workability Index, and that's to the left one. It's 7 items. You ask questions and about work-related health, and then you put this together. But most you can use also just the first item, subjective estimation of present workability compared with the lifetime best. That's quite a good item also, so it's easier to use this. And why this has been quite popular and used in many work-life studies now is because of, you see to the right there, and if you have a poor workability index in the beginning, according to this, one of the first studies in our project, then we saw that after 11 years, 2/3 of those who had a poor workability in the baseline had retired because of disability pension or died. So it's in that case, and vice versa, if you have an excellent workability, just a few have gone out from the working life. So this is quite good index or measure for workability then. And then if you look a little bit about how workability counts then with increase in age, this is from a population study in Finland. And you see in the upper figures the workability index, of course, 0 to 49, 7 is the lowest and 49 the highest, the best workability. You can see for employed persons, it goes down a little bit each year from around, in average in this 43, 44, down to 35, 36 points. But then in the other, you look at the workability score, which is just the first item, but then we can also take into account the people outside the working life. The whole index you can't ask because it's about more about you have to take into account their work environment and also sickness absences from work and that kind of things. But the first item you can use, and then you see that employed persons had a higher workability score than the total population, and that's logically also. But you can see, so you can see here from at least from the, let's say 45, 50 years of age, the work has keep up the health also and the workability. And then the very workability, as I said, whatever you measure about functional capacity and health and so on, the variation in between individuals increases with age. And here's a plot of the index on a y-axis, and then the age. And you can see here in the younger one, it's not the range between the lowest and highest. It's not that as much as among the older. And this is, each point is one individual. And that's, of course, important then if you want to do something for the workplace, then you have to take more into account individual capacities and abilities. Then from a flame study, a curve then, you see here the first 1, 2, 3 years of follow-up. So there were around 50, 60, and 15 years follow-up. Then when after it's here 92, almost everybody has retired. And you see then that the workability score and the workability is then during the retirement quite stable. So this when you get rid of the work exposure, then you feel better. And this is also agree with many other studies, this kind of longitudinal studies. After retirement, you have to remember all the time that this is a pursued workability, how people feel. And they feel then better during the retirement. And here also quite long, I think. It's up to 28 years from the baseline. And then what is really important here is that workability is almost always lower among physical workers, those who do the physical heavy work. Here to the left, women and men who had retired according to the statutory age, I mean the mandatory retirement age, and then to the right, those who had retired during some kind of disability. But you see that the workability score for the physical workers are lower than for the mental, and here mixed is something in between mixed physical and mental, for example, nurses, bus drivers, and so on. But this is very important if you think about increasing retirement age, that the physical workers have a lower workability. And the same thing you can see here, more according job analysis of different municipal jobs. You can see here to the left that the risk for ADL disabilities in old age, around 80 years of age, is much higher for the auxiliary worker, example, and home care worker among the women than those who are doing more white-collar worker, administrative work. And the same thing here, you can see down that those who have the disability pensioners has lower workability during work, but increases during retirement. So first, when they are working here on the lower lines, then when they retire, they go up not to the same level as those who had retired without a disability pension, but still that's going up. So here you also see that in this case the work has really meant something for the work-related health, and in this case workability. Then if the worker pursue changes in their work and life, then if you look at this is an example about changes in, we can call it ergonomics, then management and lifestyle. You can see here that first repetitive movements is an example of, let's say, harmful movements in the workplace. If it's a decrease, the risk for a decrease is then that the improvement, a twofold probability to higher workability after 10, 11 years in this case. But the most important here, that if you feel an increase in the satisfaction with the supervisor, the collaboration with the supervisor, that means the probability for an increase in an improvement in workability is more than 3.5 times. So here from this, we also done quite much of modeling then of for example, age management model at those ones, because management is a very important part of the workability. So how the cooperation between supervisors is very important. And then some example just about what is associated with a poor workability. So quite understandable from work, high mental work demands, lack of autonomy, poor physical work environment, and high physical workload. But also some individual characteristics. Lack of leisure time, vigorous physical activity, poor musculoskeletal capacity, obesity, older age. This is from a systematic review some years ago, but it hasn't changed that much since that. Then something again about the pathways of workability. Here you see the 81 is people around 50 years of age, and 2009 around 80 years of age. And you can see on the highest line there, that's the more than 60% has a quite slow decline in workability with aging. It's not that much. But then you see quite many pathways or trajectories which goes deep down but also goes up. And the reason or the background for this is mostly physical and high physical and mental strain among these who goes down very rapidly. So they feel a high physical or mental strain. But you see here it's possible also if you if you look at people for a longer time, that it's not just going down, it may also increase your pursued workability, which is, I think, very important. Then about workability, then if you can look at the poor workability, then against excellent workability in the baseline, you can see that those who have a poor, this is among women, have a poor workability in midlife, that's 50 years of age, they have a higher risk to have ADL disabilities in their old age. And with ADL disabilities, I mean just coping with everyday life then. So from this figure, this result, you can see that this is really also a public health issue then, because these people may need help then from home care and that kind of things. So you can, let's say, estimate quite a lot of things from workability then in midlife, during their working life. And one important thing here is also, just an example, the musculoskeletal diseases. You see here 81, around 50 years of age, have musculoskeletal pain. This number of pain sites means that the more pain sites, the more intensity of the musculoskeletal disorder. And you see it's high there for a quite big proportion, but it goes down. And then it's stable during the follow-up. But still, musculoskeletal disorders is of high importance during the working life, but also after the working life in retirement, which means that it's play an important role for the ADL functions and how you cope with daily life in old age. Then just, I don't have time to go into more to what is, how to prolong working life, but maybe just one slide then about from a couple of studies. And that means that if you want to prolong working life, good mental health in combination with a high opportunity to control working time are key factors in extending employment in older age. So I mean, of course, this means that good mental health. Of course, physical workers can have good mental health also, but it's in physical jobs it's a little bit more difficult then. But these are and the control of the working time, how much you work per day or how much you work per week or month or so. That's really important, let's say after 60, 65 years of age. And then people with higher occupational classes are more likely to continue working beyond the pensionable age compared to those with lower occupational classes. This is mostly explained by they have a physically lighter job, better work time control, and better self-rated working capacity also. So to prolong working life, it's easier for white-collar workers than blue-collar workers, if I just say it. It's simple. And then also the intention to retire is very important for prolonging working life, and I will show you just one slide about that from our newly published research article. So you have here the association between workability and also job satisfaction in working life with different factors. And if you mostly look at it's poor versus excellent workability to the left, and you see that it's a 1.6 time higher probability for those with excellent workability to have to prolong their working life. And then then, so the intention to retire is very important. So, and that's of course means that it's about motivations, attitudes, and everything else, how you feel. And then, before I conclude, what about then interventions? We just last year published a review about interventions, randomized controlled trials for promotion of workability and Workability Index and Workability Score, which I have used here in my examples. And if you just look at the figures to the right, you see that it's a small effects of the intervention, but not too big. And this means that not that, of course, we should not do interventions, but if you take into account randomized control trial designs, which may not be the best way to study working life interventions, because working life is, you can't control that much in working life. But that's an example of, it's positive, the interventions are positive, but not that much for the moment. But I think it's more about how you study and how you design the interventions. Then conclusions. Workability, yes, it decreases with age, and there are several reasons for variation in workability: mental, physical strain, musculoskeletal disorders, and much more. But it's not a new thing, but what is maybe more and more important is workability is a real important determinant for functional ability in old age, which means that it's really a public health issue then. And so it's important to follow workability during working life from the beginning, and especially after midlife, 50 plus, should I say. But there's also lack of methods to follow people from working life into retirement and old age, because we use different, most of the studies use different methods to study people in working life and then people during retirement. So this is going back to that occupational gerontology, for example, means to put this together. So we will try to have same kind of measurements for the life course. And there's a need for well-designed interventions, but there are already a lot of good practices available, so of course we should go on with intervention all the time. And then a sustainable workability during work life means a healthy retirement. Then just a short, let's say, discussions before I conclude this. I refer here to Professor Juhani Ilmarinen, who you could call a father of this workability model at the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health. He just published a quite nice, some kind of history of the workability, from workability research to implementation. And there you can see that it's very much used also in practice, this kind of model. And it's in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health from this summer. So we have models and which should be processed, of course, and so on, but working quite well. And then we need new initiatives, and I would just point out one here. So from a discussion paper from Andreas there, which I like very much, because this is maybe not a new thing, but it's still a very, very important. How to promote health and physical capacity by designing physical activity during productive work to be just right. And what just right, that's the key point here. It shouldn't be too low, it shouldn't be high. And it's more than, if I refer to it, I said that at least for 50 plus workers, it's very individually what is right there. So I think you have to think more about the individual things there. And then finally here, I think we need to have better measurements to measure let's say, abilities during working life, but also which we can use then to look at abilities in the retirement, because we don't know really now when when you retire. If I remember right now, I think for Danish people, I heard just that in 30 years or something, it's 74, 75 or something. And that's for most of the European countries also. So I mean, in that case, we need new methods and models for doing research in this field. And just a reminder, I'm just editing a special issue on sustainable workability and aging, and we have already 15, 16 articles, but it's still a couple of coming. So if you are interested, you can look at it. This is online and free to read. So then, thank you for listening then. Thank you. The workability score, which is going from 0 to 10, and you ask about what is your workability now according to best in your lifetime. It looks like it works also for people, retired people, but also unemployed people. But this is a good question. We have used it, and other people have used it, and it's validated also. But yeah, it's not. But that's also. I refer a little bit to that we have a little bit lack of good methods to use in the working life and then go on into the old age. But we have used that, yes. And it looks like it's functioning. They answer, of course, every people answer the right way, but somehow logical.
Maybe related to volunteer work they are doing or something.
Yeah. But it's more, if you are retired, related to, it's an imagine of, yes.
Would I still be able to?
Be able to work. Yeah.
What kind of research do we need to do, or what type of message should we give?
No, but I think one important thing is to get the let's say, managers on all levels to understand that age means something, and also that people are individuals. It sounds very clear for us, but it doesn't. It's not that much. So I think that's why the concept, for example, for age management has been used also to learn managers to take a look at their what kind of ages the workers has at the workplaces. I think that's a start for, let's say, in the 90s. I remember that when we went into companies, they didn't know. They did maybe what the mean age was, but not really how many young and how many old people they have and this kind of things. And I think that's very important to look at their old statistics. But then how to sell it then? Of course, if you are good in calculation, health economics, that's the language I think you should. And you can really estimate quite good savings or this. I mean, that's you have to use their own company's managers' language. Not going into detail anymore. But
there is no conclusive evidence of benefits of economic interventions. We know that's not true, but we need something
I think
based on.
If it would be another audience, I should say it in another way, took good example, better practices and what best practices and that kind of things. But this is, if you want to, I mean, for example, this is based on occupational epidemiology very much. And then you have the randomized control trial is the golden standard. And I'm not sure if I agree, should you have just that. But this is an example of, at least in medicine and also in health sciences, how you should study this. But you're very right that it's not good to go to the managers and show these kind of things. You should do it in another way then, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Klas, for your keynote speech. Another applause, I would say. And,